Megan, and today's video is a tutorial for a DIY caned daybed. I came up with this idea looking for a solution for our foyer. It is an area of our house that we don't use. We kind of just walk right through it and go straight upstairs to our living area. But this is an area I wanted to create sort of a guest space. Because it is the first thing you see when you open our front door, I wanted to look like a living space, but I also wanted to function as a really good guest space. So I didn't want to put a bed in there. And pull-out couches are really pricey. So I decided to take a trip to Ikea, and I found this really great daybed. It's only $149. It's called the U-Taker, and basically what it is it's two twin beds stacked on top of one another. So it looks really put together when it's stacked, and then you can actually take the top off and put it next to the other twin and create a double bed. And I decided that it would look much better with back and arms on it. And I was very inspired by this CB2 caned daybed, and I was not very inspired by the price tag that came with it. And I thought, you know, I could probably make something that looks a lot like that. If you've been following me on Instagram, you know that I love anything caned, and I've been using webbed caning on as many things as I can, and I've even actually weaved my own caning. But for this project, I decided to use webbed caning. I ordered it from Frank's Cane and Rush. They're all the way in California, and they're a really great company. Shipping was really quick. There's also VI Reed and Cane. I think they're a great company as well. I think they're in Kansas. I'm not 100% sure on that. But there are a lot of options for Reed and Cane. I really highly recommend ordering from a company like those two that I mentioned instead of shopping on Amazon for these. You can find them on Amazon, and I'm going to put links below for all of these items, but I think that you're going to get a little bit more bang for your buck when ordering from one of the two companies that I mentioned. And you're also supporting a small business, which that's really important to do right now. So if you're not already following me on Instagram, I am at Megan Bell Made, and you can see a lot of my projects that I'm creating in real time and see what I'm doing before I actually make a video about it. All right, now let's get started on this project. Starting with the back of the daybed, this is the first cut list, and I will have all of this down in the description box, but you'll have one 1x2 at 17 inches, two 1x2s at 34.5 inches, mitered on one end, and then one 1x2 at 73.75 of an inch, and one 1x2 at 76.75 of an inch. And this one will be mitered on both ends. And I did pre-cut these, and I sanded them before I started my project. Also, before you start this project, you will want to make sure you have put your U-Taker daybed together already. And you're going to want to set that aside for now. And since I already made my cuts off camera, I'm just going to be taking the longest piece, which is the 76.75 of an inch piece, and it is mitered on both ends. I'm going to butt that up against the wall, and using some wood glue, I'm going to attach the two pieces that are 34.5 inch long, and they should be mitered on just one end. And you're going to create sort of like a picture frame. You don't want to use too much wood glue. You just want to put it on the surface of those joints just enough to hold that together. You don't want it like oozing out. And then I actually use the daybed and put it up against those two posts to kind of create a little bit of pressure there against the wall so that it would seal nice and tight. And I let it sit for maybe about an hour or two while it dried. Then I added my last two pieces of wood for this section, and I needed to find the center of that longer beam. And the center is 38 of an inch, and that is where I'm going to put that 17-inch piece of wood. I'm also going to be attaching these pieces with some wood glue, and you'll have to excuse me putting this on with my finger, but my cap dried out and it is what it is. And then my last piece butts up right there at the bottom of that shorter piece of wood, and I'm also going to attach that with some wood glue. Now I measured down on both sides to make sure this piece was even, but you can also use a level. You want to make sure it is perfectly level across so that it doesn't look wonky later. For some added pressure to make sure this dried really nice and secure, I took two chairs and I just butted them up on either side of the frame. After it was done drying, I went ahead and I propped it up, and I'm going to use some finishing nails just to secure this together a little bit better. I don't want to use pocket holes because they're quite large and they can be a real pain to cover. Plus, it's a very thin piece of wood, and finishing nails are going to do the job. I'm using 2-inch nails for this so that it goes all the way through to that next piece of wood, and also I'm making sure that I stay really straight. You want to be very careful when you're doing this that you're not crooked at all, otherwise your nail is going to come through the surface of your wood. Also, I'm just putting one nail at each joint. You don't need to put an excess amount of nails here. We're just trying to hold it together. Okay, so now that the back is framed out, we can start working on the arms. The cut list for the arms is going to be two 1x2s at 20 7/8 of an inch, 2 1x2s cut to 24 inches and they are mitered on both ends, and then 4 1x2s at 34.5 inches and they are just mitered on one end. Putting this together is going to be very similar to how we did the back. I'm going to take the 24-inch piece that's mitered on both ends and rest it against the wall, and then I have my 34.5-inch pieces that are mitered on one end butted up against that, and then I'm measuring down from the bottom of that 24-inch piece 17 inches because that's going to be the opening for our caning. And just like with the back, I'm applying wood glue at all of the joints. The top of that 20 7/8 of an inch piece is going to sit right at your 17-inch mark. And since there are 2 arms, I'm just going to repeat this with my remaining pieces. And I used the chair method again to create that tension in there so that they would dry nice and tight. A couple hours later, I came back and I used my nail gun just to secure these joints with my 2-inch finishing nails. Now, this is an optional step, but as much as I love the color of the unfinished pine, I decided it would look better against the flooring I have downstairs if I stained all of the wood. And what's great about this daybed is that it comes as unfinished pine, so you can just use unfinished pine for your frame, and then whatever stain you choose to use will match on both woods perfectly. I'm using the color Early American by Varathane, and I actually really like this color. It's the first time I've used it. It just adds a little bit of depth, but it doesn't make it too warm or too cool. It just makes the wood slightly darker. Now it's time to add the caning. The caning I ordered is called a radio weave, and I ordered it 18 inches wide. And for this project specifically, you'll need 100 inches of caning. But it's always nice to have a few extra inches just in case you make a mistake. And I'm gonna need to cut my caning into 3 sections. So this one is gonna be about 76 inches long, and as you can see, I'm using a paint can to hold the other end down because when it's dry, it's very stiff. And you can see I'm just unrolling it to the end, and I wanna cut it at a place where it completely covers that opening, but it doesn't overlap the outside of the frame. You'll also want to cut a piece just like this for your ends for each one, and those should be around 24 inches. You'll notice this caning has an edge, and you just want to cut that off so that's not sticking out, get it out of your way, but you don't want to go past the threading when you do this. Once you have all of your pieces cut, you'll want to fill a tub with lukewarm water. You don't want it to be too warm, by the way. It will raise the grain on the cane. And you want to soak each piece. I recommend doing one at a time because they each need to soak for 20 minutes, but you don't want them to soak for longer than that. Now your caning is wet at this point. I pulled it out of my bathtub. It's been soaking for 20 minutes. I just kind of shook it out. You could put something down to protect your floor. I just usually wipe it up when I'm done because this doesn't take me too long. But I'm going to roll it out across my frame, and then I'm going to use my staple gun to staple it very neatly around the edges. I just have a cheap craft stapler. You want to make sure that you're not using super long staples like a heavy duty stapler with wood this thin. I recommend a craft stapler actually for this, and I make sure that each staple is right next to the other one, but that they're all laying nice and horizontally as I go. And you'll also notice the way that I'm doing this. I'm starting with a shorter edge, and then I'm going to work my way up and down as I go along the length of the caning. And I'm going to staple on the bottom, and then I'm going to pull the top just slightly taut as I staple the top. When I got to the middle, I just pulled this slightly tight here, and I did attach the caning to that center post. I just did about 3 staples there. Right about here is when my staple gun decided to give out on me. So I covered up my remaining caning with some damp towels. This is just a little trick I know, and I ran out immediately and got a new staple gun. When I got to the end, I had just about a ½ inch too much, so I just trimmed that off with my scissors, and then I also pulled this in tightly as I stapled. And then I just repeated this in the same fashion with the arms. Now we have all of our caning attached, but we need to do one more thing to the arms of these. I had some scrap plywood laying around that I cut down into 1-inch pieces, but you can use 1x2s for this. It'll just make your arms a little thicker. I have 4 at 24 inches mitered on both ends, and then 4 at 20 1/8 of an inch mitered on both ends. And we're just using these to cover up our caning. So I'm just lining them up. They're going to mirror the 1x2s perfectly. And I'm using my staple gun again, but I'm using a really short nail. It's only 5/8 of an inch. That way it doesn't pop through to the other side. Alternatively, you could also use wood glue, and that would work just fine as well. Plywood is just a little bit lighter than the stain, so I went through with just a rag and I just wiped it on the surface of the plywood. You can pre-stain these, but I was just careful not to get it on the caning, and it wasn't a big deal. So now for the fun part, we get to attach the sides to the back. And you can see I'm placing these with the plywood facing in and the 1x2s facing out. I used a clamp to add some pressure and hold the side to the back. I'm using 2-inch screws for this part, so I drilled a hole just slightly smaller than my screws. And I want to countersink these so that the screw head sits inside of the wood. So I'm going to take a drill bit that's the same size as the head of my screw, and I'm just going to drill in about 1/8 of an inch. And then you can screw your screw in. I personally like to finish my screws with a screwdriver because I want to ensure that I don't strip my screw head. And then you can see I repeated this process on the bottom. Before you attach the other side, you want to make sure you put your bed base inside of the frame, and just the bottom one, because we're going to be attaching it to the back and sides in just a moment. Now I'm just repeating the same thing I did on the previous arm. Before I officially attach this to the frame of the bed, I want to make sure I put some felt pads on the bottoms of this frame so it doesn't scratch up the floor if we move it. I just cut these round ones in half, and they were the perfect size to fit on the bottom of these posts. So I've turned my daybed around, I'm facing the front of it, and I'm going to attach the arms to the actual frame of the bed from the inside of the frame. So you'll want to unscrew those first couple of slats on either side so that you have room for your drill. I'm using 1 1/4 inch screws for this part, and I'm going to use the same process that I did for the arms by countersinking them. I added some screws to the back using the exact same method, but I made sure that I was attaching my screw to the leg of the bed frame so that I had plenty of room for my 1 1/4 inch screw. And you can see I did the same thing on both sides. Upon inspection, I noticed a little issue that needed to be fixed. So what I did was I took a really small piece of plywood. This is just a scrap piece. It's about 1 inch by 4 inches. And I just glued it to the inside of the arm on both sides. So then I screwed my frame to my arms again with that little shim there, and it was perfect. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you aren't already, and I will see you on my next project.